All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and begin the presentation. I hope everybody had a great Labor Day weekend, and thank you all once again for joining us here today as we present our webinar, NetSuite 2019.2 Release Preview. My name is Seth, and I'm the Marketing Manager with Keystone. Just a quick reminder, all attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the question or chat panes. And, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So we'll do our best to answer them as they come up. We always try to save some time at the end of the webinar too, but we strongly encourage you to ask away as the webinar progresses. This session is being recorded, and a copy will be emailed to everybody within probably a day or two. And so with all that being said, I think we'll go ahead and kick things off. I'm very excited to have everyone here with us today, and I'm very pleased to have Russell, Sarah, Eric, and Todd here with me as well as our featured presenters. Here is a quick look at the agenda to give you all a brief overview of what we're covering today in the release presentation. First, Russell will tell you about some of the new administrative updates. Next, Sarah will cover some of the new accounting features. After that, Eric will highlight some of the project-related updates. He'll pass it back to Russell to touch on Suite Analytics. Then Todd will discuss Suite Script, Suite Cloud enhancements. And finally, we'll try to save some time at the end for Q&A. So you can see there's a lot to cover in the presentation here. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Russell to start us off with the administrative updates.
Sure, thanks, Seth. The first thing we should talk about in this release is the Subsidiary Setting Manager, which is new to NetSuite. This is a new feature that allows you to have different post-close journal entries occur at a subsidiary level. So rather than having everything the same at the company level, you can go into this setup page right here and set the subsidiary post-close journal entries. If you want them to go to different accounts, you can select different balance sheet accounts, and you can also select a different account with which to send the net income. So this will happen, and you can set this for all subsidiaries, or you can set it for a single subsidiary. The way this works is that it's a enable features setup, so the administrator would go into company setup, enable features, and this will be a new one that says, I want to use the Subsidiary Settings Manager. Okay, and on this one, where I said before, this is what you can create on your, if you want to do put these post-close journal entries by subsidiary. So it'll give you an option of all these columns to set these different accounts that you want these journal entries to make after the accounts are closed. And it can be the same for company-wide, or you can do different ones for each subsidiary. So if you want to send your net profit to a certain account, you can do that at the end of the period, and NetSuite will do that at the subsidiary level. So let's see, the next page, next feature we're going to look at. This is kind of the TBA authorization flow. So now with NetSuite, when we do a token-based authentication for our RESTlet or web services, the consumer key, the consumer token, and the token ID are stored in the application. What this is going to allow you to do is to send a request to your account in NetSuite, grab a token back, and that token that you get back will allow you to get the other tokens you need to access your RESTlets or your web services. So it's just a different way that NetSuite is providing so that you can access the application through RESTlet and through web services without having to store those credentials somewhere and remember them. So next is the send email feature, which currently is listed under mail bounce backs, or ways to say that mails that were not delivered properly. In this new one, you're going to get more date and time information, what recipients you tried to reach, what actually happened to that, and what the delivery error was. The multi-subsidiary support for intercompany transactions. If you're working with intercompany on the NetSuite now, you know that you have to set up an intercompany vendor and an intercompany customer for all the different subsidiaries that you might have and all the different interactions that you might have between those subsidiaries. Now with multi-subsidiary, you'd be able to create a single intercompany vendor or single intercompany customer and assign that subsidiary on the transaction line based on that customer. So it's going to greatly reduce the number of intercompany subsidiary customers and vendors that one would need. Okay, this is a new user access reset tool. This is just an expanded admin feature that's going to give admins a little bit more flexibility in resetting users' passwords, resetting the security questions, and unlocking the two-factor authentication settings. Right now, it's kind of difficult to reset someone's password if they've forgotten or have not set up their two-factor authentication or their security questions. Now we'll be able to reset those as an administrator, and it's just a little bit better utility for what's going on. The full access rule has been going away for a while. Now they really mean it. So going forward, it'll just be deprecated. Anyone who has it now will continue to use it until that user goes away, and it will not be able to be reassigned. So anyone who's using that access rule, we need to update this to this core functionality. Core administrative permissions is what the setting is going to be on the roles that need to have full access. The last thing I'll talk about in the admin is the antivirus scanning in the file cabinet. This is for uploads that you put into your file cabinet. NetSuite will now look at those things to make sure we're not introducing any viruses into the NetSuite environment and that you're not downloading any viruses into your environment. So that's all protected now. And that goes for the files and the messages and anything that might get attached to a transaction and stored in the file cabinet. That's for me as admin. I'll pass it over for accounting to Sarah, and then I'll be back with you for Suite Analytics.
All right, thank you, Russell. All right, going to start out with a little, as they always do, or keep just adding to the advanced revenue management features. This time they're adding some rules-based recognition treatment. It's a feature that you can enable. It doesn't have to be used. It's not there automatically. You do have to go into set up accounting and enable it. Once you do, that will add 2 new records in the revenue section under setup accounting, and they are recognition treatment and recognition treatment rule. Will be 2 new features. 2 new records, rather. And as with everything else in revenue recognition, it all builds upon each other, so you have to create a recognition treatment before you can create a recognition treatment rule. So for the recognition treatment, it's just you can set up values for creating revenue plans for a specific rev rule, allocation types, rev allocation groups. And then once you've set up that treatment, you go and you create a rule, and you use a specific treatment that you've created, and then that criteria, so it has criteria on it that looks kind of like a search when you set that up, and that criteria determines if the script that is all part of this will run on those revenue arrangements or not. And it runs on whenever you create a revenue arrangement, as well as any revenue arrangement updates and merges. And as always, with anything new, I would recommend if you think this sounds like something you could do, and it's basically designed to be able to say, okay, this order has this kind of revenue arrangement, but when it's a credit coming back, we want it treated a little differently. So then you would set up that rule to only apply to credit memos with that recognition rule. So that's what it's designed to do. Again, if it sounds like something that would be useful, I would definitely, while you have the release preview, test it out in there and see if it really does what you think it's going to do. And along with that, they have just a general advanced revenue management enhancement dealing with prospective change orders. There used to be a few more criteria that had to be met before you could do a change order on a revenue recognition schedule, and Now, the only thing that will not allow a change order is that any revenue recognition or reclassification entries in future periods. So if you're wanting to start it in October and you've already recognized or done a reclassification in October, you wouldn't be able to have your effective date of your change order start then. It would only start in the first open period after any recognition has happened. And again, I would definitely test this in the release preview. On to advanced banking data import. They kind of played this one up a little. They're on the right track. I'll say that much. So they're definitely, they've improved the user interface and error handling. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to import a bank statement and there's an error. You usually got just the contact NetSuite support, no information about it whatsoever. They've now changed that interface so that it's not only just doesn't say submit anymore too, it says import, so you know what you're doing. It lets you know that it finishes. You can also go and do other things while you're doing that where you couldn't before. And now it actually gives real error messages that tell you what went wrong. So that's definitely a positive. You can still do the manual import just as you did before. The screens, when you go in there, are going to look a little different. There's now two tabs. One tab is the manual, and the other one is a connectivity tab. First, we'll talk about the manual. So on that manual import one, you have now two options. You can do it via a specific financial institution, or just the standard format as you did before. So you still have the option of doing it just like you did before. That hasn't gone away. If you pick a specific financial institution, the idea is that there'll be a format there that's already done. If there's not a format for your bank or financial institution, there is a lot of help and how to create that, how to parse that and make it make your own. So they do have that. It can get very technical. And the connectivity tab then, it's supposed to, you pick your financial institution. Before you can do that, you have to download a connectivity plugin, and you have to get some information from your bank. And your bank also has to be able to generate a file to a specific location on an SFTP server. I don't know how many banks are going to be willing to work with you on that. And then once it's there, the plugin can grab it and import it in for you. So it's not a manual import anymore, as long as it can be sent out there where NetSuite can go out and grab it. Thing to remember, it still only pulls the data on the statements. They haven't gotten it to, when I sat through the webinar on this, there was a million of the same questions saying, will it create the transactions that aren't there yet? And no, it does not. But it's still on their roadmap. So does not do that. And currently they've done this just for actual bank financial institutions. They have not brought in the credit card financial institutions yet to any of this direct connectivity. So currently just banks. All right. So move on to some item highlights within the kind of accounting world. This applies to items and pricing. Effective date pricing suite app. This is a managed public bundle. The number is there on the bottom of the screen. It allows scheduling price changes in advance, and it can either be for a set period of time, on October 1st to October 15th, the prices are going to be X. Or it can be a permanent change. The item types that you can do this with are inventory, non-inventory, and assembly items. So no service is included in this, or other charges or anything. And if you use matrix, it can be matrix items as well as non-matrix items. So you do have to have a few things turned on before you can use this, and for some people, that would make it a little bit of an appearance change. So again, I would definitely test this in your release preview while you have it. You have to turn on multiple currencies. So if you are already using multiple currencies, that will add some fields that, adding those fields throws off people. So want to make sure that that's something that you really need to do. Quantity pricing has to be turned on, multiple prices. And then most people have custom records, client suite script, and server suite script already enabled. So that is the effective date pricing suite app that they added with this release. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is the new vendor prepayments. So if any of you have used the customer deposit feature, it's kind of like that, but they haven't quite finished it off yet. So they created this new transaction, vendor prepayments. It's under payables, however you get to that. You do have to turn it on at company enable features in the accounting tab. And it also, under accounting preferences, you also have to set up the vendor prepayment account that these will go to. So basically all you do is you go there and you set up, it's a GL impacting transaction, and you pick a bank account and it defaults to this prepayment account, and you say how much you're prepaying and set the vendor. And that's a record out there then that is able to be there. It's in this prepaid account. It affected your cash, but it's not sitting as a negative in AP. So, and then it's available to apply. This is where I feel like it came up a little bit short, was you do have to go in and go to it and say apply, and then apply it, although you can apply it over several bills. It doesn't have to be applied to just one bill. So that is the vendor prepayment. It's a step in the right direction. And with that, I'll pass it over to Eric and some projects.
All right. Thanks very much, Sarah. Appreciate that. All right, so there's this slide and the next slide. This slide has to do with some actually pretty nice enhancements related to the use of advanced projects. And we have a lot of clients who actually use advanced projects. And the second one actually is about time entries, which also generally are related to projects as well. But I figured I would do the projects ones first. So the first enhancement is about those clients who use rate cards. And rate cards, if you use charge-based billing, which is the most common configuration for SRP type accounts, and I know most of the recent implementations we've done use rate cards, and actually with SRP now everything we demo is with the rate card. When you have a rate card, as you know, you'd have rate cards and you go to a project and you'd see this long list of rate cards to choose from when you were creating a labor-based charge rule. Well, in 2019.2, a very nice enhancement where on the client record or the customer record, you can associate the customer to one of the rate cards in your account. So whether it's one of the standard rate cards used across multiple clients, or whether it's a client-specific rate card, you can store that rate card as part of the client record. And then in the process of using a template to create a project, there's a flag that you can select. If you use templates to create projects, you click Create Project, and it says what customer do you want to create the project for. And you choose your customer. And you give the project a name. Now you'll also be able to tell the system to automatically build a labor-based charge rule using the rate card that's stored on the customer record. So that's another nice enhancement, when you're setting up a project related to a customer, so you don't have to manually create those charge rules every time. You can also put an expense rule by default on your template, so you can actually have part of your setup, a lot of the manual steps now getting automated through this new rate card enhancement. The second feature is about the introduction of activity codes. And, we weren't able to, again, so I know we always mention we don't really have access to a beta account yet, so we can't fully test some of these new features, but NetSuite is adding now an activity code, which you can use in two ways. So first, the activity codes will be related to project tasks, and you'll also be able to pull in the activity code into your advanced projects budgets, some of your project budgets, which basically I know clients have asked for in the past. They want a budget by phase or by task, right, within NetSuite, which at times was difficult to do if they weren't using project tasks. But it appears that this activity code is going to provide more flexibility, probably an easier way to set budgets on your projects by activity code as opposed to, because there really wasn't a budget by project task, so to speak. So that relatively common request now, it appears we'll be able to use activity codes to, group project tasks into an activity, establish a budget for that activity, and then do budget versus actual reporting for that activity. I know there's a couple of clients who've had to do customizations for that in the past, so that I think will eliminate the need for a customization. The third one is kind of intriguing, although there wasn't much information on it, which is they now have a project manager field, a default project manager field on projects. And, the release notes reference a section of help. Unfortunately, when you look for that section in help, it doesn't exist. So I wasn't actually able to get, much in the way here. But, this will be a way to, I know in the past we've had to create custom PM fields and use those custom PM fields in time approval routing and various routing. So I think there'll be some added functionality there. We'll see. My hope, which is totally without any basis in the release notes, is somehow you'll be able to use that field to restrict access to projects, which is a very common request that many people have said. So by putting a standard field there, my hope is eventually, maybe in the future, they will be able to use that so you can restrict the projects PMs can see to the ones where they're set as a PM. Again, not a big foundation for that, except that very common request, and it's a sign that they may be heading in that direction. A lot of people have asked for that functionality as well. And then the last one, revenue rule, recognition rule criteria and field mapping on item records. Again, this relates to some of the things that Sarah talked about earlier, having to do with ability to define when and how to use new revenue rules on for project-based elements. Those of you who use this know there have historically been some limitations on getting the department to be able to be set on a revenue element created from a project. There is now a workaround for that, but it has a number of limitations. So hopefully this will help address more of those limitations. Okay, time-related enhancements. Again, these are all pretty nice from a usability perspective, and are things I know people who use advanced projects and projects have asked about in the past. So the first is the ability to lock time entry. So in the past, we've had clients say, well, when can I lock a user from being able to post time in July? And the answer is, well, you can't. Right? There was never an ability without a script to prevent someone from choosing any date in the date of the time entry. It could have been done with scripting, but as anyone who talks to us about scripting on time records know, we try to avoid, if at all possible, writing any scripts on time records because they're rather difficult to script. But anyway, so now there'll be this new feature which you'll be able to set, which will say, I want to block someone from being able to enter time as of some date in the past. And it'll be system-wide, but it'll be good. And also, I think most clients will want to use it so that now that we're in, September, they might block people from entering time in July and earlier. there are users, people who enter time who are notoriously late, and, you don't want to block them from entering any time because then you can miss some billings. So that's a nice feature. The second one, for those who use the mobile app and, for people who do time and expense entry, obviously using the mobile app is a preferred way of, entering time and expenses. So offline, there's two enhancements to offline time and expense entry, meaning via the mobile app. The first is that you'll actually be able to enter data when you're offline. So up until now, if you had the mobile app, you actually had to be online in order to actually enter any time or enter any expenses. Now you'll actually be able to do this. So if you're flying on an airplane back from off-site remote work, you'll be able to enter it offline, and then it will sync up the next time you're online. It syncs up with the database. So that's nice. And then the second thing is, for those of you who use Android devices, you're probably aware that you could not approve time from an Android device. You could from an iPhone, but you didn't have the ability to approve time from Android devices. So that gap has been addressed in the current release. Let's see. Yeah, and then time entry modification. This is nice for anyone who has ever had to do this, where you have to, it turns out, do a bulk reassignment of time. This historically was very painful. The easiest way to do it was actually by CSV import. Now you'll have tools that you can go in and do a bulk reassignment of time from one project to the other, and it will retain the message and it will retain the information. So that's a nice feature. And then the last enhancement actually has to do with project reporting and utilization reporting. You will now be able to set a utilization target on an employee record and utilize that in new utilization reports. So it will be a little bit different. I think if you use utilization reports today, you know that it says you have this many hours based on your work calendar and your exempt time. This was the net hours, and it would divide utilized by net and show you your utilization. So let's say your target was 70%. It would say, oh, you had the net was 100, you had 70 hours, so your utilization is 70%. Well, now the new report would say, well, your utilization target is 70%, and in that example, you had 70 hours. So you've achieved 100% of your target. So it'll actually show your achievement of your target utilization, which actually is how we calculate bonuses here. So we're excited to use this new report because that calculation was always more difficult than you would expect. But anyways, that'll be a nice report, but people will have to understand that, okay, 100% now means 100% of target, not 100% utilization, which in the old reports, 100% utilization would have meant, you actually were, you're 30% above the target. So that's the last one on time. Again, these are all pretty nice enhancements that many people have been asking for over the last, couple of years. So they actually have been listening to clients when it comes to this part of the development. So with that, I'll turn it over to Russell.
Yes, Suite Analytics. 3 big points here. The Suite Analytics, I don't know how many people are using the Analytics workbook, but it's pretty good. It's a way to kind of build an Excel spreadsheet inside of NetSuite and to be able to build pivot tables off of that workbook. So what you do is you select the type of search you want to do, and you select the columns that you want, and you get a Excel-like view of that data. And you can make a pivot table off of that data. So what the new one is going to do is it's going to list all of the fields that are related to the type of transaction search that you took. So if you look at a transaction search, you're going to be able to see all the fields that are related to that, all the ones that are linked to that. You won't have to hit the chain link anymore on the Suite Analytics book. You'll actually see all the related tables and fields that you can choose. So it'll help you to populate that list and be able to make these pivot tables a little bit more useful, and that's the idea of this analytics workbook. It's kind of an Excel rendition of data inside of NetSuite. The second one, this connect is a bit wonky. It is to do with the way that NetSuite connects from outside into the database. Right now, there's a little bit of confusion between connecting to a report and connecting to a search, and the way the HTTP hooks work and the way the ODBC driver works. With this one, it's an attempt to combine this into a single analytics connect. It's going to be, of course, related now to your domain-specific account ID and how you look at that, and it's also going to be related to the way the service host is listed on your download page when you get the driver and how you set up the driver. So it's an effort to make it a little bit more streamlined to get data into Excel and other databases using the ODBC connector or through a report connect. And the last one on this is back to the workbooks. We're going to make them available on the dashboards now so that you can create a pivot table in Suite Analytics and put that pivot table onto your dashboard. So one of the things we use here for that pivot table is we'll look at utilization and we'll look at time by week, by employee, or by day. So now I can take that analytics workbook pivot table and put it onto my dashboard. The other thing that's going to be on the improvement on the dashboards now is the number of portlets is going up from 4 to 10. So you'll be able to get a lot more KPI information onto that front dashboard when you log on to NetSuite.
We had a question come in. Do we know offhand if the system notes table will be available in Suite Analytics?
I believe it is, but I'm not positive. Because it's available in search under notes. So I assume that it is under Suite Analytics, but I've not verified it.
Okay.
We'll check and follow up.
Okay.
Yeah, whoever asked that.
Okay. We'll follow up with you, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, the other comment I would make is I don't know that many clients are using Suite Analytics yet, but I know, and we've been talking about it now for 2 or 3 releases, but they have made significant improvements in the functionality, and for those who are at Suite World probably understand this is a very as it gets more and more built out, which it should really be by next year, it'll be a pretty powerful analytics tool that's built into the NetSuite platform that you'll be able to use to address a lot of historical gaps. So, I think 2020 is the year where you'll want to think about, okay, if there's things you want to put on your dashboard or really complex joins or more complex pivot tables, 2020 I think will be the year where you can do a lot. That being said, you also need to be probably a pretty solid administrator to use the feature because it's not, it's more, I think it's, as you say, certainly unless I've used it, it's more complex than using NetSuite search, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to think about how the databases interact.
Yeah, but it is pretty powerful. I mean, for those who are at Suite World, what they showed looked good.
Mm-hmm.
For us being Suite World, always looks a little bit better than it is. But that was last year, so by 20, or that was earlier this year. By 2020, I think we'll start to be able to do some really pretty powerful reporting and analytics with it, and put it on the dashboard, which is great.
Right. Okay, that's all I've got. We'll hand it over. We'll go from a little bit wonky to really wonky now and talk about the enhancements to SuiteScript. So Todd, do you want to go through that?
Yeah, thank you, Russell. There are more changes in the SuiteScript and Suite Cloud realm than what we have here, but this is kind of what we thought was most relevant to the 19.2 release. So first off, we have the introduction of SuiteScript 2.1 beta and ES Next. ES Next is just NetSuite's way of saying support for the most current version of ECMAScript. So this is super nerdy, but JavaScript is not technically the name. That's actually trademarked by, I believe, Sun Microsystems. JavaScript is actually called ECMAScript, so the versioning there, ES6, ECMAScript 6, that's the newest version. So they're saying that SuiteScript 2.1 will support any of the new ES6 standards and methods that were introduced there. Now, with this introduction of a new API, it doesn't necessarily break or change any of the existing SuiteScript 1.0 or 2.0 scripts that you have in your account if they are referenced specifically as such. For 2.0 scripts, there's a JS doc tag at the very top of the script, and that is where the specific SuiteScript version is referenced. If it's referenced as 2.0, then you have nothing to worry about. If it's referenced as 2.x, then that is a wildcard that represents the newest version available. So any of the scripts that do reference 2.x, the only thing to really keep in mind or be aware of that could be a breaking change is the third bullet point on there where it says correction for incorrect response types and restlets. Restlets would frequently change the response type that it sent out to be different than what the incoming response was. So if an incoming response was a JSON object, NetSuite would decide that you definitely don't want a JSON object, you want a string instead, so here's a string for you. And so you had to account for that in your code, and that's a potential change there. If you're referencing 2.x and a restlet and you're expecting a string back when it should have been an object, in 2.1 it will be an object. So hopefully that was understandable there. Next up we have context filtering for user event and client script execution. That level of filtering used to only be available within the script itself. You could check the execution context and change how your code was behaving within the code. Now on the deployment record, there will be a new tab where you can specify the execution types in which 1.0 and 2.0 scripts will be running. Now that you have more options for this once 19.2 drops, but it's not going to modify any of your existing script deployments. So really the only two options on a deployment right now are deployed, and then and then right underneath that there is an option for execute in commerce context. If you had that execute in commerce context checked, then in the 19.2 it will remain in the new script execution context tab that will flow through. If you have it unchecked, then it's not going to be checked on that new tab. And next page here, we've got so enhancements to the SFTP module. This is potentially huge, but the introduction of the SFTP module was quite cool until it didn't work. So hopefully this is much better than the last time they made some changes. They finally introduced the ability to list the contents of a directory. Previously, the only thing you could do was download or upload, and you can only download if you knew the exact file name and directory of file you were trying to download. So now you can use wildcards in your directory search as well as in the file names. So if you want to download all file names that start with 9/4/2019, then you just put that in with a star at the end of it, and it will pick up any files that match that query. So the new methods are going to be list, create directory, you can delete an empty directory, and then you can also move and or delete files. So that's pretty big for the SFTP module, because if you wanted to do any of that stuff before, you had to have a locally running tool that ran on someone's computer or server to do those things. Then the other change to that is the authentication methods available now support SSH keys and certificates if that is something that you wanted to use for your SFTP. Bulk actions now generally available. This is just an update. 19.1 bulk actions module was a beta release, and now with 19.2, it's made generally available so anyone can use it. We have a remove personal information update. So the main purpose of this is to help customers comply with general data protection regulation, specifically the right to be forgotten, keeping personal information private. So this allows you to remove specific key information about clients, customers, and it even removes them from the system notes and will replace names with predefined values that you put in there. So it's just a way of wiping people's data from your account. And let's see, next slide. Yes, sorry. The new data source for the Suite Analytics Connect, Russell touched on this before. It's just a change in the data source service host. I would just read the release notes if that seems to apply to you. Account-specific domain required to access the new data source. Again, that's related to the data source for Suite Analytics. Any of the URLs for the WSDL, for instance, or web services, those are now using account-specific domains. And we also have an introduction of REST web services. It's in beta, so this is a new web service method that's being introduced to NetSuite specifically. REST has been around a while. It is kind of the new hotness for web services. It's a bit faster, a bit easier to get up and running if you have two developers working. SOAP API, which is what NetSuite was primarily using, is good if you're doing a one-sided integration. If you know you need to integrate with this other system and the other system is set in stone and this is the only way that we accept data, then that was kind of the only way to go about it. But now with REST, you have a little bit more flexibility on the types of data you return, and it's going to be a little quicker. So that's pretty exciting. And there's also a new introduction of limiting concurrency per integrations. Previously, your concurrency limit was account-wide. So if you had an integration that was hogging up 15 queues all by itself and it ran all day, then it was putting the rest of the integrations in a backlog, making everything wait until this one particular integration would finish. Now you'll have the ability to set specific concurrency limits per integration, and that will kind of allow you to streamline the more important integrations or the more time-sensitive ones, give those a bit of precedence so that they're not stuck behind a longer running integration. Next slide there. I think that's it. Is that it for me? Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, everyone. So the next steps, test your processes. Make sure you're any of these topics that interest you, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk more offline and, walk you through anything, any questions you might have, any concerns you might have with the impact, on your account. Check your preview launch dates. You should be able to see them from your dashboard. You may already have access to it. We sent out the preview opt-in for people who may have needed to opt in to get their preview account. Hopefully all of you did that if you were interested. And that's about it. I don't see any other questions, but if you have any that come up, we'd be happy to talk some more and try to help out any way we can.
And these are just the highlights of the release notes. There's a whole list on your help section of release notes. NetSuite. It's much more exhaustive than what we went through here today.
Yep. So I think with all that said, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. We really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us here today. please keep a lookout. I'll send a follow-up email in just a day or two with the recording of this session. Feel free to share that with your colleagues if you'd like. Also, if you're not already following us on social media, please give us a follow or a like on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We're usually promoting these webinars on there, as well as, blog posts, NetSuite announcements, and more informational content there. So once again, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.